All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's program on issues of power and representation in American Indian mascots. My name is Van McGarry, and I am the Adult and Teen Services Manager here at Downers Grove Public Library. So just a few quick reminders. Please note that tonight's program is being recorded and will be available on our virtual programs page on our website. I'm very pleased to be facilitating tonight's program presented by Dr. John Lowe, who is an enrolled citizen of the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi Indians. He is an associate professor in the Department of Comparative Studies at Ohio State University and is also the director of the Newark Earthworks Center. And before we begin, I'd like to do a brief land acknowledgement for the Downers Grove area. We acknowledge that the Downers Grove Public Library sits on the unceded, traditional, and ancestral homelands of Native peoples. We honor with gratitude the land itself and the Indigenous peoples who have been caretakers of the land throughout generations, past and present. We invite you to learn more about the genocide and forced displacement by non-Native settlers and the ongoing injustices against Native peoples at dglibrary.org/land. Okay, so we like to let you know that if you have any questions during the program this evening, please feel free to type it into the chat box or the Q&As, which I'll be monitoring. And without any further ado, I present to you Dr. John Lowe. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Van, and hello, everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. You honor me with your presence, and I'm excited to be here and to share with you a serious topic that Van has asked me to speak on. So if you have questions, again, let Van know. I can be interrupted if you raise your hand and Van thinks it's appropriate, or we can wait till the end. And I've got 30 slides and hoping to move them through them in 45 minutes or less. So I'm going to start my screen share. And so let's see how this goes. Does that look okay? Good. Okay, so issues of power and representation in American Indian sports mascots. I teach about this. I'm at Ohio State University and teach about this probably at least once a year. It comes up in one of my classes, and so happy to share this information. I've kind of cleaned it up a little bit to make it a little less text heavy, a little less academic, and maybe more thought provoking. Hopefully it'll generate some conversation. And so okay, so I usually start off, we're not going to go through this exercise, but the what would be the pros and cons of sports mascots? And maybe at the end of this PowerPoint, we can come back to this issue. But maybe you want to think in terms of if you have some scratch paper nearby, or however you keep notes, if you keep notes, think about what would be some pros and cons about sports mascots. Race-based sports mascots using American Indians. That's really what I'm focused on tonight. So, and the through line, the theme is essentially mascots encourage stereotypes, which encourages expectations and othering, which encourages discrimination and oppression. You know, that's the thesis. That's how I see mascots as a Native person. So let me share some information about why I feel this way. So here's an image of a model, Indians and being goofed on, the fetish. Indians is fetish, the fetishization of Indians. That people can red face, they can play Indian. To many Native people, to me as a Native person, and I'll speak from a specific positionality, my own, is that I get pretty offended by stuff like this, and always have. There's been a long time that Indians we've represented either the noble red savage, or something pure and good, nature oriented. Those are many of the stereotypes that we get as Indian peoples. So presumably this kind of advertising is nostalgic, or reflects that yes, this is good stuff because it's got an Indian stamp on the label. For some reason, that means it's pure or good or clean or natural or whatever. I will note that, as some of you may already know, maybe all of you know, the Land O'Lakes butter got rid of the Indian lady on the box, so that's good. Anyway, so we're commodification of people, commodity. A bit odd. Growing up, I always found this a bit odd as a youngster. Still find it odd. So I oftentimes get, or in the past used to get, I should say, that mascots, what's the problem? We're honoring you with our mascots. And the point is that most Indians don't feel honored by this. And I hear that argument less and less. I'll share with you the other argument that I hear more and more, but we're not honored by these goofy mascots. So what I hear more often is sort of a free speech argument now. This idea that I have a right to my mascot, that you can't tell me, not to do mascotting. It's a free country. Deal with the snowflake, deal with it, Gin Blossom. And interestingly enough, I was interviewed. ESPN, the sports channel, they actually have a magazine. I didn't know that, but they have a magazine. And a couple of months ago, they did an article about mascots in Ohio. Ohio, where I'm living at right now, has the highest number of high school Indian mascots in the nation. So they went up north of where I'm at, to a small town, and their football team, all their sports teams are called the Utica Redskins. And Redskin is essentially where I come from, across most of Indian country, in the United States anyway, is equivalent to the N word. And so it's the R word. Anyway, the ESPN reporter went up there and shared with me afterwards. He went up there in a football game on a Friday night, and there were no Indians there, of course, but there were a lot of Redskin players. And one person, older person, was eager to be interviewed and said, "Gosh darn it, I feel like they're coming for my guns, my God, and now my mascot." I'll tell you what, they're not going to take any of them from me. So people get really invested in these things, right? So, but can you imagine, you know, we used to have until just recently the Cleveland Indians, but they wouldn't have been the Cleveland Asians, Africans, or Hispanics. You wouldn't even do that, right? I mean, it looks awkward. It looks, nah, that could never happen. But until, what, a year ago, maybe two, time flies with me. That's, you know, so that's just, can you imagine? So we still have, you know, the Arskins, Washington team's gone, Cleveland's, they're the Commanders, they're the Guardians, but they're still in college. There's the Seminoles. In pro sports, there's still the Chiefs who won Super Bowl, Atlanta Braves. So it's still an ongoing problem. And what it promotes is not just sort of the idea of the mascot itself, but bad behavior on the parts of fans, right? If this was the, you know, the Cleveland African Americans, you think anybody would be blackfacing? Of course not. It wouldn't be tolerated. But red facing, for some reason, has been tolerated quite a bit. It shows that, you know, there's no honoring going on. It's people are goofing on Indians and they're playing Indian. There's a long history of being Indian and pretendian. And so to me, it's racist. If any of these people were running for president and that was blackfacing, their campaign would be over. And I think blackfacing is pretty obnoxious, right? I think it's very racist. But people can red face without consequence. Kansas City Chiefs. Kansas City Chiefs last year, I think it was last year, asked their fans to quit red facing. What's that say about the mascot? When you have to ask the fans to quit doing racist stuff because your mascot, this Chiefs and this arrowhead, is inspiring them to be racist. What's that say about the mascot itself? Atlanta Braves. Yeah. Yeah, tomahawk chop. Really? Again, the Atlanta Braves finally asked their fans to quit doing the tomahawk chop, but they still do it. Now they do it all over the country, whether they got an Indian mascot or not. They still go the drums with a boom, 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 and then people start doing the chop. So it's awkward and embarrassing. Doesn't make me feel like wanting to sit with any of these people. So also the Chicago Blackhawks. I grew up in near South Bend, Indiana. Most of our TV came across the lake from Chicago. I've lived in Chicago for about 15 years also. I'm a big Bears till they move out to Arlington Heights. I'll need to reconsider that. I'm a Cubs, I'm North Sider, although they're getting pretty bougie, so I may go with White Sox. But I'm a hockey fan too, right? I'm Bulls and Blackhawks. But I wrote to the Blackhawks and suggested, why don't you take the logo off? You don't need to change the name. You can just have a black hawk. A black hawk. And you can call yourself the Blackhawks. they never responded to my my note to them. So but you know, it's goofy. So
Dr. Lowe,
yes,
we do have one hand up.
okay,
So
sure.
I don't know if you can hear, but if everyone could just type questions or comments into the chat, that would be much appreciated. Thank you.
You want to share that with me now then, Van?
There was just a hand raised, but and I've asked attendees to type their questions into the chat. So I'm just waiting to see if there was a question or comment, but I haven't seen anything enter the chat yet. I'll let you know if anything pops up.
Sounds good. One of the specific ones here are, you know, high school teams. Anyone grow up near Pekin, Illinois? I don't think it really has any relationship to Peking or Pekin, but they used to call themselves, their mascot was the Chinks. The Pekin Chinks. And gosh, surprise, surprise, they got rid of that mascot. They've gotten rid of the midgets at Freeburg Community. They've gotten rid of the Arabs. They've gotten rid of the cotton pickers. But we have over 200 high school mascots in Ohio alone that are Indian, mostly redskin, or some, you know, Indians, just Indians. But so it's, but again, nobody else. People seem to get it that these are offensive, but people seem to be fine with using Indians as mascots. There's no Indian reservations yet in Illinois. That may be changing maybe in a little bit with the Prairie Band Potawatomi trying to come back. But, you know, there was a great ethnic cleansing. Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois. There's no Indian reservations here, even though this was an epicenter of Indian population. Huge Indian populations. What happened in 1830, Congress passed the Indian Removal Act, and thereafter, all these tribes here got either moved out west, primarily to Oklahoma, or they fled into Canada, or they fled up into Wisconsin, northern Michigan, and Minnesota. And this is, by the way, my community is right here. But so without a lot of Indian population, there's not a lot of native voice. You don't get a lot of Indian mascots in Wisconsin and northern Michigan and Minnesota. Why? Because Indians don't tolerate it and they complain vociferously, vigorously. There's not really anybody here. There's no Indian, no federally recognized tribal nations in Illinois or Indiana all over here. And so people get to do what they want to do. We're only 1.5% of the population, excuse me, in the United States generally, so we don't swing a lot of elections. We don't have a lot of political clout. So we count on allies, perhaps such as yourself, to spread the word. To spread the word, but now that's not too cool to have excuse me. Excuse me. So Do we have any University of Illinois Champaign-Urbana graduates in the audience? If we do, you may remember a Legends on Green, a tavern across near the campus, where they had Chief Illiniwek in a glass coffin, and looked very odd to me. I taught at Illinois for a year, and so he's barefoot, making this holy prayer kind of hand gesture. I guess praying or begging for a touchdown. But Jean Baudrillard, one of a cultural theorist, says that he came up with this idea of simulacra. When things are simulated, and the simulated becomes the real to such an extent that the real disappears and replaced by the false. What does that mean? Well, I'll give you an example that I just came across in my personal life. Luxury vinyl wood tile. Luxury vinyl wood tile. There's nothing wood in it, and there's nothing luxury in it. It's cheap, fabricated tile, wood flooring, wood-like flooring. It sort of looks like wood until the wood topping that scrapes up, but they sell it as luxury vinyl wood tile. It's simulacra. There's no wood in it. There's nothing luxurious about it. It's cheap flooring. Chief Illiniwek is what this guy is called, is a cheap knockoff, right? So, and it's interesting. I've taught, and I don't want to get the Illinois universities mad at each other, but when I taught about mascots the year I was at Urbana-Champaign, I had students get up and walk out of my class when I complained about Chief Illiniwek. Now, this was 15 years ago when it was still fresh and painful, I guess, to get rid of the mascot. But I had students walk out. The next year I was visiting at Northwestern University, Northwestern in Evanston. When I started talking about mascots, after 10 minutes, one of the students raised their hand and said, "Professor Lau, I don't mean to interrupt, but we get it. It's racist. It's obviously racist. Are we going to do anything else today?" So it just gives you an idea of the difference between perception and perspectives on, it's fascinating to me. Mascots don't tell me anything about Indians. Mascots tell me a lot about the people that enjoy mascots. That's what I'll say. So you were just going to tell me that Illinois doesn't have any high schools with native mascots. Yes, you do. Anyone a graduate of Pawnee High School in Pawnee, Illinois? I'm not even sure where Pawnee, Illinois is. Apparently not too close to Downers Grove. Yeah. Here's generic Indian head logo. Pawnee Indians. Again, replace that with any other ethnic group or racial minority, wouldn't be tolerated. Why is it tolerated with Indians? Because of it, it's not enough Indians to complain about it, and never has been. And it's only been in the last couple of decades that anybody paid any attention to ideas of multiculturalism or some kind of sensitivity. So, but again, There's Chief Illiniwek at his first performance at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And in that football game, he was paired with Ben Franklin. Ben Franklin was not a hit, but Chief Illiniwek was. And there's been, of course, a long history of resistance. They finally got rid of Chief Illiniwek, primarily because the NCAA said that colleges that wanted to go to tournaments could not have Indian racist mascots anymore. And so they had to get rid of Chief Illiniwek. So, University of North Dakota, they're known as the Fighting Sioux. They had a alumni who offered to build a new hockey stadium for them, for the university, if they kept the Fighting Sioux logo. So the university kept the Fighting Sioux logo, and they got a new hockey arena built for them. $100 million or whatever. But they put it on a state referendum, and voters of the state voted to eliminate the mascot in 2012. So perhaps the University of North Dakota had the best of both worlds. They got their hockey arena built, and then the voters gave them the ability to get rid of the obnoxious mascot logo too. So, there's a Washington football team used to draw a lot of protesters whenever they played, especially in Minnesota, large Native group and Native allies. Wisconsin, same thing, right? Michigan, same thing. Anywhere where there's Indians and Indian allies, there's going to be complaints. One of the things that I find, full transparency, my first school that I graduated from was Michigan State, which happens to be still in the big dance basketball tournament for men. But so I'm a Spartan fan. I love this party. I love the Spartans. Go green, go white. However, if somebody told me that actually there are a group of people in Greece that identify as Spartan and they're very offended by this goofy mascot that you have, my response would not be to circle the wagons and fight like hell for Sparty. My response would be, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. We should find another mascot, because sports should be fun. Sports should draw people together, not divide. Sports should be inclusive. And I don't want to ever be taking my picture with a mascot that offends anybody. That's just me, but I don't think that that's that particularly unreasonable. And I suspect maybe it's how many of you feel too. So in Wisconsin in 2010, they signed a law that banned basically mascots, but it's not very well enforced. It's sporadically enforced though by the state. But a lot of high schools have just voluntarily gotten rid of them because of a large Native population up in Wisconsin. California, same things. 2015, they got rid of Redskins as a school nickname or mascot. And Cleveland Guardians, Washington Commanders, but we still have the Chiefs, the Braves, the Blackhawks, right? And what lesson is that teaching to our kids, right? And then they have all these high schools that are doing this too. Sometimes students will ask me, I think to see if they can confuse the professor or whatever, is, nobody complains about, Michigan State Spartans. Oh, right. Because there's nobody there to complain. And also the Minnesota Vikings, there are nobody that identify themselves as Vikings any longer. except for the fans of the Minnesota football team. And so, but, you know, it would be problematic. Well, what about Notre Dame? And my dad was a double domer. It means he graduated with 2 degrees from Notre Dame. I'm, besides Indian, I'm Irish American, although I don't identify as didn't grow up in an Irish community. I grew up in an Indian community in Southwest Michigan. Anyway, nobody mistakes, nobody thinks that this is what, sorry, nobody mistakes Irish people for, nobody's ever said to me, well, you don't look Irish American, you don't look like the leprechaun. But I've had people say that you don't look very Indian to me. And why is that? Because I don't look like Chief Wahoo, or I don't look like Black Hawk logo. What's an Indian supposed to look like? What would you do if I said, well, you say you're from Illinois, but you don't look very Illinoisian? What's an Illinois person look like? You know, is an ethnicity. It's not a race. It's not a phenotype. It's not a hair texture. It's not an eye color. It's your lineage, your citizenship. It's a political and legal status. But so nobody. But if there were Irish people that no, I mean, if people want to embrace it, and with the Florida Seminole, I will say that that's the one college team that I'm aware of, that the Seminole tribe of Florida has embraced the Seminoles as the mascot for Florida State, which that's their right to do so. But no, but that's just the Seminoles, right? So, and this is just the Irish, and so the chief continues, even though they eliminated the chief at football and other sporting events, and they don't publicly talk about Chief Illiniwek. The alumni group rents out the basketball arena at least once a year, and they fill it with people who they still have the chief do his goofy, barefoot, and awkwardly embarrassing, racist dance gymnastics. And they pay for this. They rent the arena, they pay for the entire event, free seating. And what the idea is that they won't forget. The people won't forget, and someday we can revive the chief. Hopefully that won't happen. So why the disconnect? Stephanie Freiberg, who is now a professor at University of Michigan, did a study where she determined that her and her colleagues did a study where it determined that when non-natives, when non-Indian people see an Indian mascot, they feel feelings of nostalgia and increased feelings of self-esteem and quaintness and cuteness and that kind of stuff. When Indians see it, Indian kids reported feeling reduced self-esteem, community worth. They don't see themselves being represented by mascots. What we feel like is that we've been locked into history as an archaic vestige of the past. And when I've talked with people about this, I say, well, if you want to have an Indian mascot, I'll volunteer. You put me up on the logo. I'll be the Black Hawk logo. Lawyer, professor, former tribal council member, 5 college degrees, a JD and a PhD. I think I could represent Indian people okay. moving into 2023 with a little hop in my step. I'll volunteer to be a mascot, but don't make a mascot some cartoonish figure from 200 years ago. So people say, well, who cares whether people's feelings are getting hurt? Who cares? Well, if we define situations as real, they are real in their consequences. And so we can say that race is a construct. And so we're post-race. And I guess that's what they want to believe in Florida now, is that we don't need to talk about race anymore. We're past that. Well, we're not past that, obviously, right? It's I just saw on the national news tonight another person of color who was basically murdered by officials that are sworn to uphold the law. So we feel like it's racist, and if we feel like it's racist, our feelings are legitimate too. We don't have to just get over it. It's fair that we feel this way. So back in 2014, I was asked to be on this panel at Ohio State on why are we still debating race-based sports mascots. And interestingly enough, they asked me if I would take the position of pro mascot. And I told them, no. Do you know who I am? I'm Indian. I'm Pokagon Band Potawatomi. I've been fighting against mascots for 30 years. And they said, yeah, but you're a lawyer. You're supposed to be able to argue both sides of the case. And I said, usually I can, and I practiced law for 17 years, but I'm not going to argue for the mascots. So they couldn't find anybody in Columbus for that day to argue in favor of mascots. So we all ended up preaching to the church choir. So what good is an apology? We've had presidents and department heads of the Department of Interior. We've had the Catholic Church, the Pope. Everybody wants to give us an apology, and that's it. But it feels pretty hollow when there isn't action behind it. That's why I liked when Van did that abbreviated land acknowledgement today to start us off, was that it was essentially a call to action. It was an articulation of how the Downers Grove Public Library is going to respond to the fact that it's on lands that used to be indigenous, right? And so we don't want apologies. We want action. And getting rid of mascots would make us feel a little better. I'll mention one last thing before I guess I got a few minutes. I wanted to talk about, I think it was in Elk Grove Village. I don't know if anyone knows where Elk Grove Village is, south side of Chicago. I had been dealing with the Savage Candy Company. And Savage was the founder's last name. It's in Elk Grove Village, and it's been making machines since about 1850. Long history, long been bought out by various peoples, and some other family owns it now, but it's a corporation too, so board of directors. Anyway, their logo, the family name happened to be Savage, and they've always kept that, but their logo was an Indian head. Savage, Indian head. Savage, Indian head. What's that tell you? Indians are savages, right? And I complained. I talked with the president. I was able to talk to the president, and fortunately, he's been the same guy for the last 20 years. And he said, we're not going to get rid of that logo. Everybody loves that logo around the world. They see Savage, Indian head. Yeah, we get it. Around the world. So I would write them at least once a year, complaining about it. And then a couple of years ago, I guess one of the owners, she's kind of like George Hallis's daughters. I imagine her like this. Uh, uh, you know, a wizened old lady who is the ultimate owner of this Savage Candy Company, and she lives in near one of the rich suburbs of Phoenix, Arizona. And they said, well, we talked with the owner, and she asked two of her Indian friends, and her two Indian friends say that they love mascots. Well, I don't know who her Indian friends are, but I know how people, as a lawyer, I had rich clients back in the day, and I know how people are when you're a multimillionaire and you're living in Phoenix, Arizona at your fancy mansion. People will tell you whatever you want to hear. And I can imagine her question was, you don't mind Indian mascots, do you? Well, so I complained and complained. And finally, I got this LinkedIn account. And then I got this change.com thing. I ended up putting, broadcasting the Savage Candy Company label around the world with asking for a petition. And I had, within about 2 weeks, 50,000 people signed the petition to get rid of the Savage Candy Company logo. And I presented that to the president, and he said, essentially, well played. And so, I talked with the owner, and she says, if they're going to make that much fuss about this racist logo, remember it's Savage Indian, Savage Indian. If they're going to make that much fuss, let's find something else. So, with the thanks to change.org and the 50,000 people who signed that, they changed it to, and what they do, they changed it to an old-fashioned candy making machine. And to be honest with you, you don't even notice the difference. It's Savage Candy Company, and it's great, and I love it. And so that was one victory that I had. Is there a way to make race-based mascots okay? I doubt it, but we're running into time, so I'll let you ask me, or I'll take your suggestions if you think there's a way. So I'm going to stop sharing right now. And so thank you for listening to me, allowing me to present this information. And so any questions or comments, suggestions?
Yeah, we had a few questions and comments. And I apologize. I don't know why the chat was disabled, but we did get some questions and comments in the Q&A. Thank you, everyone. So Joe asked a question that you touched upon. If you could go into a little bit more detail. What do you think is the real reason people resist changing their mascots? It seems like such a clear and obvious decision to change their mascots, but people just refuse to change.
Yeah, it's I think unfortunately it's similar. I don't think that they're consciously aware of this. It's like the people down south who love their Confederate statues. They don't even realize the history of it, that it's reflecting racist white supremacy, Jim Crow laws, that it has nothing to do with honoring the Civil War or honoring, the sacrifices of anybody on either side. It's always been there. They've told it's been good. They assume it's good. Their mom and dad liked it, whatever. Their neighbors like it, and they've always liked it. They're not native themselves, oftentimes, and so what's the beef? They just, I don't think that there's some insidious racist conspiracy of let's create racist sports mascots based upon Indians to poison our children's minds. I don't believe in that kind of conspiracy theory. I think it's just that nobody's ever told them differently, or if they're told. But you bring up a good point, Joe, is that there may be, when people are told that it's racist, people hate change, right? And so if they harbor a little bit of that dislike of change and they like to have their power, we all like to feel like we're empowered, right? And so you can't make me change my mascot. We all like it here in town. That's what they say up north in Utica, Ohio, is that everybody in town loves it. Well, there's no Indians living in Utica. It's a town of 500 people, right? So in south central Ohio. But just because everybody likes it doesn't mean, you know, that they should keep it. So it's issues of power, issues of ignorance, and again, I can't stress enough the fact that we don't have the political numbers. We need allies. We need people that aren't Indian to speak up with us, to hold people accountable.
Thank you. And Joe also shared that they're familiar with the Pekin, Illinois teams, which were founded on the lie that they were on the exact opposite side of the world from Beijing.
I love it. Goofy, huh?
Gwen shared that as someone who is raised to be ashamed of my native ancestry, these stereotypes only reinforce my understanding of what my elder family members went through.
Absolutely. You know, it's this you know, there's a whole Phil Deloria in his book Playing Indian. Phil Deloria is at Harvard University now and is a Lakota Indian. Wrote a great book about sort of this replacing real Indians with fake Indians, you know, fake Indian imagery, fake Indians in movies, fake Indian songs, you know, and so we get replaced. And then it's fun to sort of memorialize the fake Indian, right? We're not a threat anymore. We're not, you know, the Indian problem has been solved, presumably. You know, so as long as we keep quiet, you know, so yeah, you're right. It reflects a lot of our past, is that we weren't asked, nobody asked us how we felt about this. And if they did, they ignored the answer.
All right, I'll get to your question in just a moment, David and Vera. Brad had mentioned in the Q&A that they are from Newfoundland and a mascot activist in Canada. And yeah, so there is a documentary link that they shared about their experiences in fighting mascots. And so I'm going to share that link as well into the chat for everyone. So thank you for sharing that, Brad. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly, so my apologies. Brad said that the Baytuk wore ochre on their bodies and clothes and were the original Redskins. They were completely eliminated by 1830, and their genocide is the reason my ancestors were taught to hide their heritage for fear of being murdered for fun. And so there were a few other links that Brad shared that I will also share into the chat for folks to check out. Thank you, Brad. All right.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for your, you and Vera for your, well, I'm sorry, David and Vera for your activism, and Brad for your information. Yeah, it's rather old now, but a couple of decades ago, Charlene Peters came from Spokane, Washington, to be a grad student at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. And in the movie In Whose Honor, tells her story of when she arrived on campus in the late 70s, early 80s, with her two children, native children, her Indian kids, and just the awkwardness and the the heavy racist anti-Indian environment that just having a mascot like that promoted. And so it really, it's a little old, but it's still a good film to watch. In Whose Honor, and it's probably you can get on YouTube or whatever.
So David and Vera put in the chat, you mentioned a change.org petition. Are there other supportive actions that we can take? We've attended a couple of events by Midwest Soaring Foundation. Are there other local Chicago area groups that we should be aware of?
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful question. Thank you. I don't know. I would contact the Chicago American Indian Center to see what that's essentially the overarching loci of American Indian activism and stuff going on in the Chicago area. And they might be able to direct you better. The Bradley University Braves in Peoria, that's icky. The Chicago Blackhawks is icky. One of the things that would help, and I'm not sure on how to get this done. So if anyone has any suggestions, please email me at low.89@osu.edu. If you could put that in the chat, Van.
Yes.
Athletes have a lot of power over what happens with their teams. And we saw this where I forget what pro basketball team, the owner, I think it was Utah, maybe, had told the press, running a basketball team is like running a plantation. This is what this white owner said. It's like running a plantation, and you just got to keep everybody working hard in the fields, something like that. Well, his players heard that, and I think they were playing the Lakers, Los Angeles Lakers, the next night, and both teams, they refused to play. They refused to play because they were being essentially equated with being slaves, which to an African American obviously has some serious insulting connotations, right? And so what happened? The players didn't play, the game was canceled, and the NBA told the owner, you have to sell the team now, immediately. You forfeited your right to have the team. So if we could get athletes to feel as strongly about the feelings of other people, other groups, as they do about their own. If the Chicago Blackhawks, if the players just said, I'm not going to play, we're not going to play unless you get rid of the Blackhawk, unless you change the Blackhawk and put John's picture up there, or something similar. We're not going to do it. They would change immediately. What on the inside they say is the reason why the Washington team and the Cleveland team changed their mascots is because the athletes were complaining, the players were complaining, and they were saying that we're not okay with this anymore. So if we could get Kansas City to say that, if we could get Atlanta to say that, that would be the quickest way to do it. Otherwise, is to get fans to say, I'm not going to go to the game. I'm not going to buy a ticket until you get rid of this. so that seems to be the way that in the capitalist society, how things work, right, is money. So if we can influence their business model, then, and I think that's what the Savage Candy Company was worried about, was we're going to get some really bad press about this. We're going to get a bad name. Oh, that might affect business. 50,000 people on change.org. Who knew? Okay, well, okay, we'll change the logo. I've been working on it for 15 years, and then, one day it just all came together. So it can be, but the thing, don't ever give up. Keep fighting. Complain. One person can complain, and if enough people's complain, sometimes if we're just knock on the door, if enough of us keep knocking on the door, they get tired of listening to the knocking, and they'll let us in, or they'll change what they're doing.
Thank you. All right. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? So it looks like we've got a question. Mary Kay said, we would find it interesting to have a webinar discussing the monuments, quote, honoring Native Americans.
Yeah, I would too. We actually did one a couple of years ago when Chicago had its Chicago Monuments and Memorials Committee, which I'm a member of. And we did, we had a web page, had stakeholders meetings, community meetings. We had webinars about the impacts of monuments and memorials meant to honor people. We dealt with quite a panoply. I think 45 ultimately became addressed in the white paper to the mayor. And Mayor Lightfoot said that she wasn't going to accept the recommendations of the committee. She was going to have a committee review the work of the committee. So, but of course, we know that she's not going to be reelected. So hopefully the next mayor will do better than the last about that. But we've already had it. I don't know how we would get that going again. There's a lot of energy put into it over the last couple of years, and then to have it all hit a brick wall at the mayor's office took a lot of sales, a lot of wind out of a lot of people's sails. But perhaps with a new mayor, we can start that again. Advocate for that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. David and Vera shared that they really like the idea of the Kingfisher as the mascot for U of I.
I like that. Yes, I think that would be better than, I did tell the students that, they only have a block eye. That's their logo now. And that's, I mean, I have a little Spartan that I can hug, right? How do you hug a letter? A letter is no fun, so yes, I think a kingfisher or something like, something that you can embrace, whether it's the ducks or the geese or the wolverines or the eagles or whatever, something that is, fun but lovable. I just saw where the 90-year-old turtle fathered some babies with his 56-year-old mate. And they're both, I love how old they are. They're still having babies. And so maybe they call them the radiating turtles, so, yeah, as long as it's, I mean, there's so many things that we could choose from, right? From cheese to popsicles to, but I would agree. And I told the students back then that I do get why I can't get warm and fuzzy about the block eye, that's a little cold.
All right, we got a few comments. Joe, who had left, said, thank you for sharing this info. And Mary Kay said, thank you, go green, Spartan strong.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks, Mary Kay.
All right, and okay, we're at the top of the hour here, so we have one more comment from Gwen. This was very insightful. You shed a lot of light on how ingrained this is in our society. Thank you, Gwen.
Thank you, Van, for hosting me and hosting this event. I really appreciate it, and it's as usual, always fun working with you. And thank you again, everyone who came out tonight, and really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you.
Yeah, so thank you, yes, to everyone for attending tonight, and we hope you enjoyed the program, and many thanks to our presenter, Dr. John Lau, for his thorough and thought-provoking presentation. And we'd also like to thank the Talk Story Grant for funding this program. And as always, please continue to check our events page on our website and our newsletter for all of our latest news and events at the library. And thank you again, and stay safe and have a great night, everyone. Take care.